Mr. Brown, there's a theory in the great pantheon of aeronautical theories that there aren't enough designated pilot examiners because there's this big backlog of people waiting for check rides. And there are people who believe there's a shortage, and there's people who say there's enough. And that's all kind of a weirdness of numbers because about a decade ago, there were 935-ish DPEs.
Right.
And in September of this year, 2024, there were about 935. But the pool of applicants has essentially doubled. So, what do
Correct.
you think? Is there a shortage? Is there not a shortage? What's happening out there, Pat?
Well, I can just tell you from personal experience that my calendar is booked out about 2 months. I don't like to go out much past that because so much can happen, bad weather delays, who knows what. And when I go out beyond 2 months, I find sometimes I get last minute cancellations, and that's another story. But uh, I do think there's a shortage. I think it's real. I think there are things that applicants and flight schools can do um, to have a positive effect on that so-called shortage. And and we can talk about that. I think we're planning on a chapter one and chapter two of this this conversation. So I'll just tease you, those that are watching, that part two of this conversation, we'll talk a little bit about that. But the shortage is real.
It's to put it in context, and I think this actually is really interesting. Half of check rides, 50%, one of every two, is done by just 200 DPEs, a quarter of the overall. 75% of the rides are being done by just 350 DPEs, which means DPEs are much like CFIs in the case that most of them aren't really carrying a whole lot of the load. And that may be because they're in very rural areas. I mean, it's entirely possible there's a DPE in Wyoming or Montana who does 3 check rides a year, and there's somebody in Florida or Texas or Southern California who's doing 5 a week. But it is interesting that there's a significant number of DPEs that are not really doing all that many check rides.
Now that there certainly is some truth to that. One of the things that the FAA did a few years ago is relatively recently is to take away the fences. It used to be that, let's say, if I wanted to do an exam, I'm in Texas, as you know, greatest state in the world. I'll have to fight you about the Florida thing. Uh, anyway, if I wanted to go somewhere outside the state of Texas, anywhere, to do a check ride, I would have to get permission from not only my local FSDO, but the FSDO whose jurisdiction I was going to. And several years ago, that changed and they dropped all the fences. So I could go to California. I could go to Florida. I can go anywhere without having to ask anyone permission to do that. So the hope was that would mitigate the issue a bit. I don't have any personal experience that it has, partly because I'm so busy here in Houston. We don't have anybody coming into our area to help alleviate the shortage. But I'm so busy here in Houston that I literally could do check rides 7 days a week, and the FAA permits us to do 2 a day and a recheck. But that's a 14-hour day easily right there.
Yeah.
Um, but I could easily do 2 a day, 7 days a week, and still have a backlog. So there, at least in our area, it is true. Now we have added, I think we've added 2 or 3 in the last year, but we have one that's down for a medical reason, temporarily, we hope. But so our net gain is really only 2 at this point, and they're working as hard as they can. Very few of us are retired. If you want to, in in the literal sense of that word, I'm retired. So I do this. I'll say it full time, um, with some caveats, but most of the people that are in our area are airline pilots or 135 operator pilots or something like that. So they have, real jobs. Um, I think maybe there's just me. Well, now think of it, maybe me and maybe two other people that are kind of officially retired from the day to day corporate workforce.
Yeah, that's part of the challenge. I own an interest in a flight school in Southwest Florida and one in South Central Florida. Finding a DPE down there can be very challenging. On my home field, there are 5 DPEs, and there have been for a number of years. But you and I could complain about this or talk about the issue, or anybody sitting around a coffee table at an FBO could bitch about it and say something should be done. But things are actually being done. Back in September 2024, 5 congressmen and a senator actually wrote to the FAA administrator and said, hey, there's a problem. We're seeing it. Our constituents are telling us about it. What are we going to do about this? We need you to step things up. So, Pat, being on the inside as you are things changing in the DPE world now? Is there some relief coming down the pike?
Yeah, the letter that you referred to is the source of the numbers that you've been quoting. There are a number of footnotes. I mean, here's a copy of the letter that you sent me. But yes,
Wait a minute.
um,
Are you saying that I did some appropriate research prior to this episode and helped your big brain get bigger? I just want it on the record.
miracles do happen.
Thank you. We can move on now.
Anyway, this information did come from this congressional letter that you did some research and found, but the answer is yes. The FAA reauthorization bill that was signed back in gosh, I guess it was April, and went into effect in November the 12th. Directed the FAA to do some things about that. They'd been working on it in the interim anyway, because currently we are up from 935 DPEs. We're up actually to 1,035. Now that's 100 DPEs basically, and it may not sound like much, but hey, it's 100 DPEs.
That's
And
10% increase. That's
yeah,
good.
and we're adding them, or the FAA is adding them at the rate of about 10 to 15 a month. So, yes, but one of the problems inherent in this, at least from our FSDO standpoint, is that our FSDO is currently authorized to be staffed with 11 inspectors. We have 2.
Ooh.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if that's an issue that is pervasive through the FSDO system, but if it is, that's a problem that has to be addressed as well, because guess who supervises us as examiners? The local FSDO, and it's the inspectors within the FSDO. For us, they're called managing specialists, but the FAA calls them, I think, operations inspectors. But for us, they're called managing specialists. So there are only 2 people at our local FSDO who are qualified to act as managing specialists, and they have literally hundreds of other duties to perform as a part of their operations inspector title. I think that's the correct title. Not just supervise us. If it was just supervise us, it would be an entirely different situation, I would imagine, but it's
This
not.
is, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's all right. I'm done.
I was going to say it's kind of interesting because in this era of Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency, where we're talking about getting rid of all kinds of departments and employees, the FAA has the exact opposite problem. They're understaffed in many areas, and we are adding DPEs, as you just said. This means there's a career opportunity out there for people. And I must admit, I used to think being a DPE would be a pretty great gig because I don't really want to fly big iron. I like being home. I like small airplanes.
Right.
I did start the process at one point, but of course, with 5 DPEs on my field now, they're not going to add a sixth.
Right.
How would someone go through the process of applying to become a DPE pet? What do you have to have in your logbook to be competitive? And how might somebody start that? Because I
Yeah.
mean, I know you're retired, but you're also a bazillionaire who just you own like 14 cars and 6 houses. I mean, I understand.
Oh yeah, I wish. People think that, but no, that couldn't be further from the truth. Well, first of all, I would refer anybody that's watching that's interested, that's seriously interested, is to do a Google search for FAA order 8000.95 Charlie 95C, and I think we'll put that in the show notes, a link to that order. So, Volume 1, Chapter 1, Section 1 talks about the application process. Um, then, if you go to Volume 3, Chapter 1, Section 1, that talks about the qualifications, the number of hours that you have to have, the different type of hours that you have to have. Those kinds of things are in 8000.95C. But let me just give you just a real quick overview of the way it happens. First of all, if you're really interested in being a DPE, you start the process by going to the Designee Management System. That's DMS, but you can just do a Google search on the Designee Management System. It'll give you a link, not a problem. You go to the Designee Management System, you set up an account, and you fill out an application. It's a job application. And you fill that out, hit submit, and now it's the waiting game. What'll happen is if the local FSDO sees a need, they will go into DMS and they'll start looking for an application, a resume that suits or fits their particular needs. Maybe they need a helicopter examiner. Well, I'm a fixed wing guy. They would go right past my application because I'm not a rotor guy. So let's just say, Jamie, that you pick the long straw, and they call you and say, Jamie, we'd like you to be a designated examiner, and you say, yeah, I can't wait because I want to stay home and fly small iron. All right, so they're going to give you a link to what's currently called the designee. I think registration system, DRS. That is going away shortly, and I think everything moves to DMS at that point. But at any rate, there's an online course that you have to take, and it's not free. You have to, here's the thing that most people really think is that examiners are rolling in the dough. And while there certainly is some truth to that, the other side of that coin is everything we do comes out of our own pocket. The FAA pays for nothing. The government pays for nothing. So when you're asked to be a designated examiner, you're sent to a website to to do basically an online course and take a test. And by the way, it's one and done. If you fail the test, there's no second chance, unless there's extenuating circumstances like your internet went down or something like that. Assuming you pass that test, now you get to go to Oklahoma City for 4 days. Again, on your own nickel, transportation, lodging, meals, everything for 4 days. Now, I will stop short of saying that those are 4 days you won't get back again, because honestly, I found it to be quite interesting. 2 days are spent with the FAA personnel themselves, talking about IACRA and talking about kind of the way you handle the check rides and regs and things like that. The second 2 days are breakout sessions in small groups in small conference rooms with an FAA, I guess, mentor, if you will, where you work on your plans of action, which we're required to have for each designation we have: private, commercial, instrument, multi, CFI, whatever. And then you practice one-on-one with a partner, being the designated examiner, being the applicant. And each person in that room, there's usually six or seven people, 5, 6 people, whatever. It depends on the size of the overall class. But it's a small breakout session. Get a chance to practice giving an oral test, both on the giving and receiving end. I thought that was going to be horrible. It turned out to be the best part of the entire thing, and I've got my performance on video to help me. Anyway, so you get through all of that, and then you have, I think it's 10 days to do another test, which is a one and done test as well. You get that done, assuming that you get that done successfully. Now, the FAA may, at their discretion, the FSDO may, at their discretion, ask you to undergo a proficiency ride to make sure, I guess, you know how to fly the airplane. And my FSDO decided that they wanted a proficiency ride. So, my managing specialist, or soon to be managing specialist, and I jumped in our Cirrus, and off we went, and we did some stalls and steep turns and slow flight, and we didn't break anything. So at the end, he said, "Great flight," but we're not done yet, because he then has to observe me doing a check ride. So I have to find an applicant that's willing to have a Fed sitting in the room watching me do the check ride to the applicant. And it's not just in the room, it's in the airplane too. So,
And just to be clear, the applicant has the ability to say, I'm uncomfortable with that.
oh, absolutely. Yeah. This is not a mandatory thing. And my policy, and I suspect many others in my position, my policy is that if someone agrees to do that, it's a free check ride. They're willingly subjecting themselves to not only me, but my boss. But the pressure really is on me. It's much easy. I mean, it's easy to say that there's no pressure on the applicant. The, the pressure is on me, because it's my job.
So there's
That
two
we're talking
people
about.
sitting up front sweating during that check, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and I mean, and seriously,
Yeah.
because it's not without its stress. But assuming that that goes well, then the examiner will say, okay, let me do the internal paperwork. Boom, 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 poof. You're an examiner. But it doesn't stop there. Every 2 years, every 24 calendar months, we have to be observed again. Same thing. We have to find somebody willing to have a Fed in the back seat and in the oral. Um, and for and also every 2 years, we have to go back for recurrent training, not to Oklahoma City. They're doing it on Zoom now, but we have to go through that again. You pay for that.
Mhm.
And every other designation that you might have. For example, I can issue ground instructor certificates. I can issue drone certificates. I can issue um, FAA certificates based on foreign licenses. I don't know if I say ground instructor certificates, but I can do that and some other things.
Mhm.
Um, um, but there's a recurrent training on all of that, and there's a test involved in those too. It's a computerized test, and it's a PowerPoint or a Zoom thing. That's some of that stuff is self-study. You just do it when you have your chance, but it has to be done every 24 calendar months as well. And again, it's not free. So I don't want to make it sound like it's burdensome, but it's not just a matter of the FAA saying, okay, we want you, um, boom, here you go, via con Dios, and, go make gobs and gobs of money. It isn't like that at all. And there's quite strict oversight with what we can and can't do. After every check ride, well, before every check ride, we have to secure permission from the FAA to do it through DMS. It's an automatic process after your probationary period. And after every check ride, we have to do an end of check ride report, again via DMS. But all of these things just add time. So, when people look at the rates that DPEs are charging these days, um, uh, I mean, some of them are awfully high. I will admit, I see some of the rates, and they're eye popping to me, but they're not without some justification, given the applicants see the tip of the iceberg.
Mhm.
They just see the tip of the iceberg. They don't see the other things that we're tasked with doing and knowing, and so on and so forth. So
So if we did an executive summary on this, then If the question is there a DPE shortage? Yeah, there is because
Yeah.
there's so many more applicants. Is anything being done about it? Yeah, we've added about 10% more DPEs in the last several months, and that process will continue. And maybe the most compelling thing of all, I'm going to try that again in English. Maybe the most compelling thing of all is the viewers can actually say, oh, being a DPE is a nice side hustle or a career I might want to pursue. There's a process. Once you've got your instructor certificate, you've got the experience, you can pursue this just as you did, Pat. So the outlook is rosier than it's been, but it's not separated from us. We're part of it. We can all become part of that process if we wish to.
Yeah, I think the process could be simplified. I think, that 5-minute dissertation that I just did on the process, I think could be simplified a great deal. But it is what we have to work with right now. Um, I do think the process will be simplified as time goes on, but as I said, it is kind of what we have to deal with right now. But hopefully, this last 20 minutes has given viewers kind of a little bit of an insight as to what's going on behind the scenes, so to speak. And yeah, there is hope, but it's kind of like the Titanic. It's slow. Turning the Titanic. It takes some time, right?
I'm not sure I like the Titanic analogy, but I'm going to let you go because now we have the struggle over which state is the best, Texas or Florida. We may have to come to blows over this. But Pat, I really appreciate you sharing your insight as a DPE. This is a real issue that affects the entire industry because if you can't get your check ride, you can't start doing the flying that gets you the experience that gets you to the job you're hoping to do.
Right.
So this is all connected. Folks, thanks so much for coming by. Click like on this because you just learned something worth knowing. Feel free to leave a comment down below. What's your experience trying to get check rides in the current system? And if you are a DPE, share your experience as well. And of course, subscribe to the channel because you just have to. You have to. I read a thing. It's in the YouTube rules. You have to subscribe. Pat, thanks so much. I appreciate it. And I will see you soon, buddy.
Adios.